Welcome to Sound DeFi, the podcast that delivers key insights from today's thought leaders on all things DeFi, blockchain, crypto, and private market asset data. I'm your host, Chris Berg. I'm here with the chairman and CEO of Inveniam Capital. You just walked off stage here in this unbelievable conference you put together here in Miami, all about Web 3.0. Share with our listeners what's the most important thing you shared today about what's happening in this space.
Well, first off, Chris, great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me. The most important thing that I shared was an understanding of private market assets are going to trade digitally 24/7 and globally. And as they do that, the only way you can do it is if you understand the state of that asset, so you can understand the value of that asset, so you can then value the capital stack, so you can trade it. Right? And what we're doing is helping lay the data architecture along with a whole bunch of our partners, right? Crew, Oasis Pro, Rialto, Texture, Apex, Cushman & Wakefield, Ledger, just a whole bunch of these great partners who are here, who are playing roles in the ecosystem, but it all starts with the data. What's the state of that asset that I'm going to trade a piece of its capital stack back and forth? And really, we just kick this off with an understanding of, how did we get here, right? What were the origins of technology? And I think there were 3-4 steps that got us here to today that are kicking off an opportunity where we think private market assets are going to trade globally, digitally. And when that happens, it's going to open the door for whole types of asset owners, whole geographies that have been underbanked, underinvested in, undersupported, gaining access to capital. And Inveniam we're focused on that.
So one of the things that really jumped out to me, because it's all about the adaptation, right? And you use the credit card analogy with the NFTs and where is this space going? Can you talk about that credit card analogy again to help people understand, okay, we know it was tough maybe to go from cash to credit cards at one point. Now everybody's doing it. It's going to be the same thing with the digital assets.
Right. I mean, you think about this, hey, listen, you can pay for your meal with this. I can pay with it with cash too, right? It's pretty easy. But credit cards, you can now link to intermediaries like your Amazon account, right? Instantaneously order everything from groceries to clothing to you name it to be delivered to your home. And the ability to manage that relationship through a credit card, that credit card can be used in a read-write data transaction that then you can transact commercially. When we take these tokenized instruments where they can read, write, transact, but then you add the function of compute, where you can do basic compute, if-then functionality, and then also smart contracts that you embed with some AI functionality, you literally are going to see how people buy, sell, structure, and allocate capital change. And the largest of the large corporations, Inveniam, is moving 100% digital by 2030. They're not going to own a single asset and they're not going to touch a single piece of paper by 2030. Inveniam owns real estate. How are you going to trade the capital stack of real estate in a digital form unless that digital form is smart? It understands the condition of the building. It's looking at data real time from the building. It knows it can trust it. It's got mechanisms to reject data as well as accept data. And Inveniam is the way that you can trust data on assets that you don't have to do physical inspection on. And eventually they're going to do that for the middle of the capital stack, right? And this is where we're going.
So tell us more about what is Inveniam.
Inveniam is an operating system for data, right? It's an architecture for data that has some really cool applications that we've built, particularly around capital markets. But at its core, what we do is we credential data where you can control your data and you own your own data and you decide how to monetize your own data in your systems, right? Because right now, data is organized around the user. You want a copy of my data? Here you go. You want a copy of my data? Here you go. But then you go, oh, is this updated? Has there been any change in the asset? And what we're doing is we're now changing it where the users are organized around the data instead of the data organized around the users, and then you're always worried, is it up to date? So what we're doing is we're literally orienting everybody to the same golden copy of the data, that when it's updated, everybody knows it's updated, right? So there's one golden copy, you know it hasn't been altered since the moment it was created. If it was altered, you can see it, by who, when, who's downloading it, who's accessing it. So you have this digital notary, so to speak, of the data, right, that you can trust it. And so what we're doing is we're literally facilitating everybody looking at the same piece of data, and we're not making copies of it. So you're an asset owner, your data, you control it. And when you want to use data from the golden copy, you don't get a copy of the data artifact. We extract the information out and deliver it into your tool real time. So your access to data is real time, instantaneous, instead of let's get the document, review it, stick it in. But what you're doing is you're saying, no, I rely on this information, whether it's updated instantaneously, daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly. But when this new information's here, we make sure it's right, and then that's fed real-time, kind of on-demand delivery of information. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow more frequent requests on data, shorter intervals, so you can manage risk better. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So let's talk about what does that mean then for buyers and sellers of these private assets. One of the things that jumped out to me as well is you talked about, hey, eBay democratized the garage sale. We're going to democratize private assets. So at the end of the day, if I'm a buyer and or a seller, how does this impact what I'm doing?
So if I'm a seller, I'm going to be better informed of what's being bought and sold immediately. So I structure my capital stack for this new real estate development, this new multifamily housing, this new student housing, this new office building, to what the market wants right now instead of my last deal that cleared. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I have a much better read on what the market's buying and selling that instant, right? So that's number one. As a buyer, I have access to deals in geographies that I never would have gone into because I wouldn't know how I exit. Does that make sense? So a lot of people go into New York City because the exit in New York City is more assured because of the volume of buyers and sellers. If I need to sell, it almost doesn't matter what economic condition we're in. You can find a buyer who's got lots of cash, who knows this is going to be a good location down the road. That's not true in Middle America. Do you know what I mean? That's not true in Fargo or in Bismarck or in Jamestown or in, Sioux Falls. The big institutional buyers, not understanding the exigencies of those markets, is not going to engage. They're not going to buy because they don't know. And what that means is those asset owners and developers, the cap rate of the identical property in Fargo and New York City, they trade at a significantly different cap rate. We think that there'll be parity because as people can go in and out and they can understand and there's greater liquidity and people can buy in and they can buy out of student housing connected to NDSU, right, compared to Columbia, or they can, buy Jackrabbit, right, in Sioux Falls housing instead of, something that's in Miami. They're gonna be able to get a more appropriate return, and they're going to feel more confident of the exit.
The other thing that stood out is the liquidity aspect, where you say, okay, now I've got this real-time data. You're using AI to give me a real-time look at what the value is of this asset, and also because of that, I'm assuming that my liquidation process is much easier. I think you said, hey, normally it takes 120 days for you to close on a deal. Now with this, it's going to be, you said days, maybe even minutes in the future. So walk us through that, please.
Yeah, so one of the things that you want to do is when you take a physical site visit of a real estate asset, you take 2 or 3 or 4 turns of the review of that data because you're not sure you trust it. You're getting a one-time snapshot, and so you're taking multiple snapshots, and you're looking at it. But if you're able to look at the performance data of that asset over the last 10 years, where every time that data is created, there's an instantaneous snapshot, right? And there's a picture being told. Suddenly you have a context around which your picture today is seen within, right? And I always use an example, Chris, of imagine some mishap, right? The great story of when you spilled wine on a white carpet at a Christmas party, right? And 5 years from then, you didn't do it, and you're not even sure you were at the party, right? And so what does your wife do? She goes, no, you were wearing a blue shirt, you had spilled this, you were upset about something, you turned around and your elbow hit it, and she brings to mind the 5 details in context, and the memory becomes alive. Us credentialing, not every piece of data, but enough data on a daily, weekly, monthly basis can contextualize the picture that you see. And for a sophisticated real estate buyer who owns other portfolios of assets, they're going to say, yep, it's performing like that, like I think. And if there are data points that are errant, then they're going to be able to say, ooh, there's a problem here that this narrative doesn't hold. Does that make sense? But if we have all of the data points that we're credentialing as they're doing it, and they look at a snapshot, they can understand that asset instantaneously because you're comparing thousands of data points against the same types of data points in your current portfolio. Does that make sense?
100%. So last question for you is, for many people right now, NFTs, crypto, Web 3.0, sort of this foreign space, right? It's like the metaverse to some people. So you did an incredible job today bringing the past to the present, talking about the future. Take us out 5 years. What is Web 3.0 in 5 years, and how does it make a difference in my life?
So the way you commute value and you store value and you transact in value is going to be as different 5 years from now as the difference from 98 to 2005 for retailers. I want you to think about every retailer and what's happening with a retailer, right? And now you go to a store to destination shop to find something instantaneously. You ripped something, so there's a convenience or there's an experience element, right? And I'll give an example, a tale of two malls. There is a mall, a very nice mall that 15 years ago was phenomenal in this local area, or not this local area, in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, that today you walk and it's like a ghost town. And it's still nice, and it's a nice demographic area, etc., but there's no destination. Last weekend I went with my wife to another mall called 40 minutes from us in Michigan, and it was packed to the gills. And people weren't there just to shop. They were there to get an experience. The level of entertainment function that was occurring in that mall was different. That wasn't even an issue in the late 90s. Do you know what I mean? Like, at all. You just had stores, you delivered up stores, it was clean, and there was good tenants, and you were great. Now, it's clean, good tenants, entertainment value, there's got to be a draw, there's got to be an attraction, and if you don't have that, it's a ghost town. Commuting value and trading in real estate. You're going to see dumb building and smart buildings. Two same buildings, opposite sides of the street, same tenants, same net income. One that's giving real-time information to a portfolio manager who owns that asset, and the other one who's getting that data through an intermediary, and the data is 6 to 9 months old by the time it reaches them. And the middleware was 4 or 5 set of junior accountants. The dumb building is going to trade at a discount of 20 to 30%. It's going to be the difference between that nice mall to the one that is the destination. And the difference is going to be which building is providing the data, because if it has data, it's going to allow a multitude of investors to come in and out of it quicker. And if you can get out, you'll get in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you mentioned that, how now you're going to have very wealthy people able to store their assets and get out faster. So I want to give you a chance for a last word. Anything else you want to share that I haven't asked you?
Well, first off, I want to thank you for having me. You guys have been so great to us, and it's been a pleasure to work with you. But not just you. There's a whole ecosystem of people who are working on this with us, right? I want to give a shout out to Accrue and Oasis Pro Markets and Texture and Rialto and Apex and Cushman and Wakefield, Greenspoon Martyr, Tokeny, right? Accumulate. There's just so many great people who are here. Vertalo, 3 Points Communications, some of the world's best people, Dynamic Mining, DevPro. These are the people who are going to bring about the reality that I'm discussing, because it's not an Inveniam project. It's a project of an ecosystem.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been an incredible start to the day. We appreciate everything you're doing in this space. So, Pat O'Meara, Chairman and CEO of Inveniam Assets, it's just a pleasure to be here. So, wishing you continued success, sir.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. This is the Sound DeFi podcast that delivers key insights from today's thought leaders on all things DeFi, blockchain, crypto, and private market asset data.